Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the M3 Market Update. I hope that everyone had an excellent Labor Day and you're ready to come back and face fall head on, as I think it's going to be an interesting one because there is a lot going on. Okay, welcome back. I had an eventful weekend. As some of you might have read the Substack. As I was traveling around, met up with a local Twitter follower, and we'll talk more about that. Additionally, yesterday, I found myself in a battle royale on Twitter with Logan from Housing Wire. I've never named any of the analysts here that I talk about, but in terms of who is out there talking about a shortage of inventory, well, Logan and I will be debating this weekend. Lance Lambert is going to be moderating. So you guys look out for that Twitter space. It's definitely going to be interesting. My goal there is only to educate and to politely and respectfully bring an alternative narrative. I'm not interested in memes or any of that jazz. So it will be interesting, as was yesterday, and unfortunately, it sucked up a lot of my time. So this might be a little bit shorter than usual today. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is what's going on in New York City, because I believe that this legislation that Airbnb tried to fight in New York City, the short-term rental legislation, is going to be a huge case study for all of us to watch. New York kind of leads the charge in things like this. We had Dallas come out with its legislation, but New York City, when they do something like, ban smoking in public areas, they are always leading and people will follow typically whether they want to or not. And what I find most interesting about this legislation specifically is that it's definitely necessitating a coordination with the city and registered users in a way that I haven't seen as much of in other locations, where honestly the city has come in and basically said, they cannot be listed unless they're registered with New York City. Now that's fascinating because it's really creating this kind of partnership that I'm sure Airbnb does not want in any shape, form, or fashion. So fascinating stuff, guys. There was an article in the New York Post I haven't tweeted out yet, but if you haven't seen it, check it out. More to come. For those of you that follow me on Twitter, read my Substack, you probably know that I think this is going to get very political in 24. Whichever side picks this up, because housing affordability has it is just cratered. And at the same time, you're seeing homelessness increase. Like, big article in the Wall Street Journal, I believe, about Missoula. I'll put that. One of my favorite places used to be to go visit on my way to Glacier National Park. And they have a homeless crisis there. So pulling those Airbnb numbers, that wasn't a city on my list. So I should be able to have that comparison, hopefully, for the next Substock. So as homelessness rise and we see all of these short-term rentals that may or may not make their way to listing for sale or listing for rent, I think that that dichotomy, or those two camps, are going to come together, and it's going to make for an interesting election season. Again, I think housing will also become part of the debate in the budget showdown, because there's a $10 billion HUD budget proposal out there. I think that as people, these new talks around government spending, I think this is going to come up, and it could very well hamstring HUD from any response that they might want to do as we continue to see mortgage delinquencies rise. And again, I think most of you know, but if you're new to the show, I don't believe foreclosures will be there tomorrow. We're definitely going to see an uptick. I'm seeing it in my books, but there are so many legacy loss mitigation programs out there. Once it hits that 90-day, it's going to catch a lot of that early delinquency. But there is a subset of the population that has used up all of its benefits, as well as you have the investor slash, not all investors, but some of them, a third per the Philly Fed, are fraudsters, those will be the ones you will see go delinquent very quickly. You'll see people walk away, and we're already seeing it happen. In the Substack this week, I'm kind of talking about one that's probably in that camp of the fraud, delinquent, etc. So, welcome back. I want to talk quickly just about what I saw this weekend. It was such a great weekend. Spent some time in the Fort Lauderdale area and talk about this in my Substack. And this is a neighborhood that was impacted by severe flooding in April of 2022, but very different vibe from many places I've gotten in the Miami area. And this is something I talk about as well in the introduction of the Substack, that I hope that none of you think I have anything against these cities. What I do have issue with is the narrative and the hype that has surrounded so many of these cities that have really, haven't really been justified. And so, and let's take a more balanced view. And so I'm a believer, if you love your city, you should fight for it. So please don't ever take it if I'm picking on one of your cities. I don't mean to. I'm just trying to give an alternative perspective to that hype narrative that I'm seeing out there. Really good example is something I tweeted out, which is kind of what started the whole the Twitter showdown about Austin and how it had been overhyped, and now how they are in the top 5 in terms of migration according to the U.S. Postal Service. Now, those of you have been reading me for the longest time, you know that I'm very curious about that survey, because when I was down in Austin, everybody I talked to had recently, or in the last couple of years, had moved down because there was work down there in the hospitality sector. So I was staying in hotels, talking to a lot of people in hospitality, sitting next to, when I was getting my food, people in construction. All of these were temporary workers that moved down for that boom. And when I talked to them, they all had plans to move back in the next 6 months to a year because they couldn't afford it anymore. And so it's very fascinating to actually see this reverse. Believe me, in my wildest dreams, I didn't believe that it would show in the U.S. Postal Services already. There are other surveys like United and U-Haul where I thought maybe we would get some more information, but here it is. And this is just, it shows you that, our data you cannot take any data point and use it absolutely, right? You have to triangulate to the data, or you're always going to be a little bit in the dark. And what I find with a lot of the talking heads on Twitter is that they want to put their head in their sand. They don't actually want to have a debate at all. Let's talk about these listing sites they're using. I think that they're basically hoping no one questions them. No one questions the data. No one questions their pretty little chart. Because guys, it's just a chart. It's a point in time. What's the context behind that? So that's what I'm trying to do here, is just give you context for all of this stuff that you're hearing on Twitter. So in my Substack, this particular neighborhood, there is one house that I went to look at, and of course toured the rest of the neighborhood, and it clearly had been bought as, an investor came in, bought it, wanted to do Airbnb. That's how they're trying to market it on the listing site, asking $9,000 in rent in a location where the median income is $67,000. And you guys may say, well, it's Fort Lauderdale, you're close to the beach. No, you're 7 miles from the beach in this location. And it is not a beachy location. Sure, there's some cool restaurants and things like that around, but not $9,000 a month worth, guys. Tiny little house, tiny little 3-bedroom. And I think one of those bedrooms, after walking around the house, was actually like a converted laundry room. So, and now this house was bought for $500,000. Probably wasn't worth that. And now it's listed for $765,000. Previously, I think it sold for $235,000. But this area has been impacted by the flooding, and it reminded me very much of a neighborhood in Austin that I saw with so much investor activity. Every home was in some stage of the fix and flip or selling or renting out process. And so this neighborhood was very similar, not a lot of long-term residents. and the ones that were there, there were a lot of them had to get repairs on their homes because of this unprecedented flooding. They were living in campers to deal with the mold. And mold, you're like, why are you talking about mold? Guys, I will be talking about mold a lot in the future because, believe it or not, mold is one of the things where it becomes very problematic if this is a GSE or government sponsored enterprise loan, Fannie or Freddie. You have to have clear and marketable title to deliver this back to them. And mold is one of those things that there are certain workouts you cannot do if there is mold. So, and down here in Florida, that happens quite a bit, especially these vacant properties that people don't come to visit. So I know it's not sexy, and who wants to talk about black mold? I didn't want to talk about it in 2012 and 2013, all the way up to 2016. But if you were in default, you had to talk about mold, and you had to get real familiar with Freddie Mac's 105 form. Anyway, geeking out on you there. Okay, so this trip to a much more pleasant area of Miami, just the people were so kind. We went to a raw bar, where we had some amazing shrimp, hung out with Kristen from Twitter, who'd done an excellent post on this particular property. We had a really good time, but I get a little afraid for that area because I think what has happened is a lot of investors came in after that flood, snapped up a lot of these homes, and they're really trying to kind of transform this into, kind of a little Airbnb mecca. The problem is, and what, was before a lot of single families, in a decent area that are completely being priced out. So check out my Substack if you haven't. I think you'll enjoy it. Okay. So the other thing that I just wanted to talk about quickly, commercial real estate. So, there is an upcoming show with Jack Farley on For Guidance with John Twig. John Twig. He's just got his finger on the pulse of the banking sector and kind of residential in the banking sector. So looking forward to that. Jack posted out, and I included this in the Substack, a chart that 70% of commercial real estate loans that were sort of coming due they either sort of matured without resolution or they're in default. And so check out that Substack, that chart. I think, kind of this conversation, we've been talking about it. Well, a lot of people have been talking about this for years, but most people that keep their eyes on real estate have really started talking about it. It ramped up in the fall of last year as well. So almost a year. But I do think that the rubber's hitting the road, and we're going to start to see more and more and more distress listings, more and more foreclosures, more and more handing back the keys. And this conversation is going to have to be had in many of these cities. So I think we are, I kind of said this last week, I believe, but we're kind of at the turning, and we're coming around the bend summer's about to be over, and everybody's looking at year end, and there's all kinds of decisions you have to make before you close those year end books. And so, and if you follow kind of, the Eurodollar market, Eurodollar University, I plug on this show all the time, encourage everybody to watch that show to understand what's happening behind the scenes in the shadow banking sector. That September and October, these are the months when things start to happen. And so, be on the lookout. I do believe we're going to start to hear some noise. Not exactly sure where it's going to come from, but I think internationally, globally, it could be China with all of the distress they're seeing in their real estate sector, their property sector. But I think we're going to start to see some malfunctions in the market. So this is the time when we all need to be paying attention. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to race through kind of the stats for this week. I'm getting excited as, again, for me, rounding the corner. Once we get to January, I'm going to have a full year in a lot of these markets and with a very different view than most people take. Because I'm looking at all of the different, I'm looking at long-term rental, short-term rental, listings for sale, multifamily, commercial, all of these things together. And there is just not a ton of historical data out there that you can easily get your hands on. One of the things I'm super excited about is the data I have for short-term rental. I shared some of that on Twitter this past weekend, or yes. So, if there's a city you'd like to get that data for in short-term rental, please just make a comment here on Twitter and I can provide you a 5-year history. And so there's many people out here that say Airbnb is not a big deal, and that's because they've never seen the numbers. Okay, so without further ado, I noticed this week that listings went down about 1.59% week over week. And now a lot of people tell you don't ever look at week over week data. Again, we're looking for a signal here. But what I'm starting to notice is that at the end of the month, the listings always go down somewhat. And and looking at specific properties, I think that behavior I've seen is kind of bearing itself out, which is that people take those listings off at the end of the month. They put them back on because they want to reset the clock on the average days listed and aging. These are more, people who are actively trying to sell, not your regular, Joe who's just listing their house. Like, to them, although realtors will often give you that advice, etc., nobody wants to see a property aging for, 90 days, 120 days, or like the one I talked about last week, that crazy condo apartment in Miami has been listed for over 7 months. And in reality, that whole building has been listed for more than a year. And it's not fully occupied. So there's games that people play out there, all kinds of games, just trying to get their property sold, which understandable, right? Okay, so listings were down week over week. It'll be interesting to see, and this is listings for sale. Listings for rent were actually up. And I think there are some markets where we can see the pattern that you can see on a property level where people will take it off for rent, put it for sale, and then you kind of have this circle where they then put it back on rent. And we know rents are cooling as well. And so, I think a lot of different headwinds are coming to a head all at the same time. And we are going to start to see these things play out, and not just these really hot markets. Okay, here we go. Okay, so top cities, largest percent increase in inventory week over week between 827 and 93. So Rosemary Beach is just taking the top spot here. Again, this is 38. This is one of the most popular vacation spots in the South. It's up at 9.68%. Cape May up at 5.88%. Westchester County, this is an interesting one, up at 2.49%. Salt Lake City at 2.37%, and Galveston 1.85%. And I would say besides like Westchester and Salt Lake City, these are your typical Airbnb spots. Okay, so top cities with the largest increase in inventory compared to the 10-week average. Rosemary Beach is up at 30.77% to the average. Now, they're number one for 2 weeks in a row. Bozeman up at 7.75%. San Ramon at 7.22%, down from number 2 spot. Westchester County to the average, 6.73%. That's kind of big. I'm very curious what's going on there. Augusta up at 6.51%. Now, top cities' largest percent increase in inventory from the start. Okay, so I did a little looking. 48 of the about 70 cities that I track have increases in inventory from net increases from when I started tracking in January. Now, a lot of people say, well, you need to look year over year. Absolutely. I'm looking at that as well. But what I'm trying to do here is find the signal. And these markets, those 48 markets that have had net increases in inventory from January, to me, are going contra to the trend that everybody is talking about out there. And this is why looking at aggregate numbers always leaves you, kind of blind to what's actually happening. So that's why we don't do that here. Number one, again, top cities with largest percent increase in inventory from the start, January of 23. San Ramon at number 1, 118.33%. Coeur d'Alene, 85.49% increase. Denver, 55.04%, up from number 4. Like, these are persistent increases in inventory. San Francisco, up at 51.72%. that is down from number 3. I actually skipped. Rosemary Beach was at number 4 at 54.55%, up from number 9. So Rosemary Beach is quickly moving up this list. Austin at 48.4%, 46%, down from number 5. Now, what I find very interesting is that, so a lot of people are like, well, that's Austin or that's so-and-so. Well, I think as these other cities start taking Austin's place, we're going to see that this just isn't just an Austin story. This isn't just a Phoenix story. And in fact, Phoenix isn't even in the top 10 because a lot of their trouble started before January when I started tracking it. Okay, then Galveston up 46.34%. San Jose up 44.72%, down from number 6 last week. Bozeman up at 40.22%, up from number 10. And then Portland at number 10 at 36.8%, down from number 8. Okay, so very interesting. And again, lots of cities are having that net increase. So important to watch and look at in context with other sets of data. Okay, top cities with highest percent increase of single family rental listings to a 10-week average. Encinitas up at 38.67%, up from number 2. Galveston at 26.54%, up from number 5. Rosemary Beach up at 24.35%, down from number 1 last week. But again, their listings for sale and their listings for rent are up. Very interesting, right? Probably seasonal, the listings for rent, but still. Let's watch this. Augusta up at 21.42% and Portsmouth up at 20%. Okay, top cities with the highest percent decrease of single family rental listings from 827 to 93. All but Scottsdale in this list saw listings for sale increase this week, so keep that in mind. Rosemary Beach down 13.33% in single family rental listings. Destin down 11.29%, Sedona down 9.72%, Scottsdale down 9.45%, and Bozeman down 9.09%. Now again, just remember, Scottsdale is the only one that did not see their listings for sale increase at the same time. So very interesting. Okay, I leave some stats in the Substack about Airbnb short-term rental and the fact that, you look at these numbers year over year, you look at the inventory increases, and they are slowing down significantly from their pace, their rate of change in 21-22. So top cities with highest percent decrease in average daily rate week over week. And again, week over week is not such a great metric, right? All kinds of things can happen. You can have people, there's a big NASCAR event or something like that. That's why but it's also interesting. We take it as one data point in conjunction with looking at the average as well. And of course, I'm looking at this year over year, and I have those charts. You can just request it from my Substack. Okay, so highest percent decrease, Rosemary Beach down 38.39% week over week. El Cajon 34.32%. Destin down 32.42%. Encinitas down 31.69%. San Diego down 28.82%. Okay, top cities with highest percent decrease in average daily rate compared to 12-week average. Rosemary Beach, so this is compared to their average, a 12-week average, and not compared to just week over week. Down 45.55%. Ventura down 31.99%. Indianapolis down 24.65%, Destin down 19.32%, and Hoboken, which always ends up here, I don't know why, down 18.95%. Okay, top cities with highest percent increase in average daily rate compared to 12-week average. So this is an increase in the average daily rate, and I kind of find it interesting. San Francisco, big increase there, might be something going on, but 53.82%. Johnson City at number 2 up at 33.10%. Austin at 16.84%, also interesting. Oceanside at 16.53%, and Las Vegas at 14.37%. So if you guys know of anything going on in those areas, like a local event, please just let me know, leave it in the comments, and just tell me what you're seeing. And that would be fantastic. It just helps me understand what's going on in these markets. Okay, and then in the Substack, I also list the top cities with highest average daily rate for July of 2023. I should have that for August by next week or the following week, but I'll quickly just run through these again. This is highest average daily rate for 23 for short-term rental. Newport Beach at $771. Westchester at $745. Rosemary Beach at $720. And so this is important. Rosemary Beach in July, top 5 of highest average daily rate. So a good bit typically, and they were in there. They were number 1 in July of 2022. So been on the list both years. Cape May at $592 and Encinitas at $576. Okay, so that's that for the stats this week. I also did, if you guys missed it, I did just an incredible Twitter space with @Economica. His name is Chris, and we talked about in depth about demographics, guys. And if you missed that Twitter space, I really recommend it. This demographic story is important, and anybody that's missing it is missing half of the story. And that's one of my issues with the talking heads is that they're all looking backward, but they're not looking forward, as if there is going to be some miracle that happens to take up this housing supply. And Chris also addresses immigration. We're just not seeing enough to change the numbers right now. And we don't also see, or he and I agree on this, the political appetite right now. So check out that Twitter space if you haven't. As always, please reach out to me. This isn't a time to be making hasty decisions, whether you're a homeowner looking to sell, whether you're an investor looking to buy or sell. So please reach out to me on any of these platforms. I try my best to respond on Twitter, M3_Melody, MELODY. On LinkedIn, Melody Wright, WRIGHT. On Substack, M3Melody Substack, and here on YouTube. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a comment. I hope that you had a wonderful Labor Day. I hope you got some rest, because things are about to get really, really interesting. And so I hope that you stick with me through the next few months, because we're all going to need, I think, some friends as we go through the fall. So thanks again, guys. Thanks for joining, and see you next week.